How's it going, everybody? Peter here again for another update video. I hope you're all doing well. I know it's been a really long time since I've posted anything on YouTube, but hopefully with the new direction I've decided to take with the Mustang, I'll be posting here a lot more often. So let's get into what's going on. So fairly recently, I decided that I want to retire the V6 and LS swap my car. A lot of you are wondering why I decided to go this route, and that's exactly what I'm going to cover in this video. Now, it came down to a few things, but the main deciding factor for going this route was actually a pretty negative circumstance. If you've been following my Instagram, you would have seen that my stock motor blew up. I don't really know why. I wasn't driving the car. I wasn't there when it happened, although I do have a few theories, but we're not going to talk about that in this video. That situation is ultimately what made me decide to go this route. I thought to myself, why just replace the motor, go with the same thing I already had? Why not use this as an opportunity to build something bigger and better? And that's exactly what I'm going to do. So as far as why I'm LS swapping, first I think it's important to cover why I decided not to pursue the V6 route any longer, especially for you boosted guys out there who are planning for the future for your car. You might find this very valuable. So the reason I decided not to pursue the V6 any longer was because of two things. The first was because if I wanted to reach my next power goal, which is about 650 to 700 wheel, if I were to do that in the V6, it would be extremely expensive. As of right now, or as of a month ago, the car was on 14 pounds of boost, completely stock sealed motor with a P1 head unit, so the entry-level supercharger, making about 500 wheel horsepower on pump gas, on 91. If I were to go to that next installment, that next power level, it would have been a very involved and very expensive process. For one, I would have definitely had to get that motor built. Would have needed rods, pistons, probably new sleeves, because the stock sleeves on the 3.7 they're really weak. So even that, I had pistons, mind you, but that in itself, just the motor work, would have been probably $4,000 to $5,000. It would have been very expensive, and that's not including anything else. The blower, for example, the entry-level P1 supercharger that I had, that was already running a really small pulley. It was running a lot of power for what it was, and I was getting a lot of belt slips with just a 3.2. So if I were to go with a smaller pulley, that thing would have been slipping like crazy. I don't think it would have been able to put out 650 to 700 wheels. So to mitigate that, I would have had to send that blower back to ProCharger, get them to rebuild it into a D1, which would have probably cost me, I would think, at least $2,000 Canadian. So overall, this whole endeavor for me to reach that next level of power with the V6 would have required a lot of work, and it would have been very expensive. So altogether, I probably would have spent $7,000 to $8,000 Canadian, probably even more. And that's not including any work that might possibly be needed to be done to the transmission. The transmission was just a stock MT82. It just had a nice clutch, a nice flywheel, had an MGW shifter as well. But who knows? I don't think that stock MT82 would have been able to handle that kind of power. Overall, with the V6, it would have been very, very expensive, and that's one of the main reasons I decided not to pursue that path anymore. Reason number two I said bye-bye to the V6 was because I feel that I've had my fun with the platform. I've had this car now for 6 years, about 3 years NA, almost 3 years boosted. So yeah, I've had the car for 5.5, but you know, still now in my life, almost 6 years later, it's time to move on to something else, and I think an LS would be a very viable candidate. So after I finally decided that I no longer want to pursue the V6, I had a few options as far as engine swapping. Now, engine swapping, it's always been on the back of my mind, whether it be LS, Coyote, or even the 3.5 twin turbo from the Ecoboost, but ultimately I decided to go the LS route for a few reasons. So I'm going to go through each option. I'm going to explain why I did not end up choosing that route specifically. The first option I was most heavily considering was a Coyote. I had my heart set on a Coyote pretty much as soon as this engine blew up, just up until maybe about a week ago. I thought 100% I was going to go Coyote, but there were a few factors that swayed in my opinion towards the LS route. So as far as the Coyote, the major benefit to that would be that everything's just, it would be a straightforward bolt-in swap. It's coming from the exact same chassis, the exact same car. So all I would have had to do was buy a salvaged Coyote car, take everything out of that car, put it in my car, and I would be back on the road, no problem. Let alone I'd have to do some tuning and stuff like that. But it's the same car. You wouldn't have to do all that custom fabrication work. It would be the most straightforward swap. But there were a few things that swayed me into a different direction. The first one was that it wouldn't really be unique. It would just be it would be no different than a regular 11 to 14 GT. So why would I do all that work for something that's just that you can buy from the factory? And that's not to say that it's not a smart option. I think it's still cool, but that's just my opinion personally. Second option was because I would have been making less or the same power as what I had before for all the money I would have spent. Now, mind you, I am still in the process of selling all my V6 stuff, so I would have probably been able to break even and get a Coyote. But by the time, let's say, I did the swap, I got like long tube headers for the Coyote, a Cobra Jet intake manifold, or whatever intake manifold I decide. By the time I get to a Coyote with the same power level as my V6, it would have been quite a bit of money, and it would have been definitely a couple $1,000s over the amount of money I received from all my V6 stuff. So I just thought for the money, the power to dollar, Coyote's probably not the best option. My second option was one that isn't as popular. It's the 3.5 liter twin turbo EcoBoost from the Ford F-150 trucks. I believe there's 2 cars out there right now with this swap that are making pretty considerable power, but at the end of the day I decided that this wasn't the swap for me. First reason was because I felt it was a little too similar to the 3.7, the boosted 3.7 setup I had before. Like, it's a little different. Yeah, it's twin turbos versus a supercharger, but ultimately it's so similar. So why would I just thought, why do all that work for something that's almost the same? Also, those engines are really expensive now. I just did a search on car-part.com, and the long blocks themselves, they're going for like $3 to $4 grand. That's really expensive. So because of those 2 reasons, I decided that the 3.5 wasn't the option. But what did intrigue me about that was that the 3.5 motor matches up to the 3.7 MT82. It just bolts on, right? So that was an intriguing proposition for sure. But like I said, because of those 2 reasons, I decided that this probably isn't the swap for me. Just too similar, and it would have been really expensive too. Now the third option, this has been on my mind for a very long time. LS swap. Now for those of you who are saying, oh, LS with Mustang, you can't do that, I honestly don't care. I think it's cool. It's my car. It's my money. If you have a problem with it, just don't follow this build. I don't really care. I think it's awesome. Yeah, the LS has definitely been on my mind for a really long time. I think LS swap anything. LS swap any car. I think they're just so cool. And the LS is proven to be reliable. It's proven to make power. It's so much cheaper. Power per dollar, you get so much more versus a Coyote, or you go 3.5 EcoBoost. So for me now, after selling all my V6 stuff and spending a little bit of money on top, I'm going to be able to reach my power goal much easier than I ever would have been able to with a Coyote or the V6, like the 3.7 or the 3.5 EcoBoost. Definitely power per dollar. You cannot beat an LS. Back to the 3.7, achieving that 700 horsepower goal. With a 3.7, you would have to go build motor, bigger blower, whereas with an LS, like a 5.3 or a 6 liter, you can make 700 horsepower fairly easily. You could do it on a completely stock bottom end, no problem. The LS is just, it's a proven platform for going fast, and it's awesome, and it's fairly cheap. As far as Coyote swapping that same amount of money versus an LS, I'll have a way faster car with an LS, and something that's actually cool and unique, in my opinion. Another benefit of the LS is that the engines themselves, they're so much easier to work on. It's an older design, yes, but as far as taking that engine apart and working on it, it's very, very simple. Versus a Coyote being a dual overhead cam motor, and same with the 3.7s, there's just so much more going on. And one other thing that I really like about the LS engines is that the LS engines, they're physically a lot smaller. Another added benefit for when you're working on them. versus the Coyotes. The Coyotes are actually, they're pretty big. And also going back to the money aspect of the LS swap, long block, like just one thing that I kept thinking of is, what happens if I Coyote swap and something were to happen to the engine? If something similar, like if the engine were to bend a valve or throw a rod, something like that, getting a new long block for a Coyote would cost like $2,000. Like, I haven't seen in my local ads here in the Toronto area, I haven't seen a Coyote go for less than $2,000. Whereas an LS, a 6-liter, a 5.3, you can find a long block for $400, $500. So for me, doing an LS, it's going to be a lot more work, yes, but it's way more cost effective. I'll make way more power, and if something goes wrong, you have the parts readily available, and they're very inexpensive. I think the best order of business now is to first get rid of all my 3.7 stuff. It's almost all gone. Fortunately, it all sold really quick. The Pro Charger sold in like 5 hours, which is amazing. Second step is to accumulate all of the LS parts. Thanks for listening, guys. I hope this cleared some stuff up for you as far as why I've decided to choose this new route. It's not to say that the V6 is bad or anything. The 3.7, I had a ton of fun with this platform, but me, in my situation right now, I feel it's time to move on to something bigger and better, and that's why I'm going LS. Not going Coyote because of some of the issues associated with costs and power per dollar, although that would be cool, but LS is where I feel my heart is, and it's just something I've really wanted to do for a long time, and that's why I'm going this route. So thanks a lot, guys, for watching. Please stay tuned for future videos. Follow me on Instagram if you aren't already, and I'll see you in the next one. And if you have any questions, please post down below. I'm happy to respond to you. Thanks a lot, guys. Stay safe. Take care.